What happens when Hollywood royalty collides with actual royalty on live television? In just 39 seconds, one shocking comment would turn a friendly chat into the most explosive exit in talk show history. Jimmy Kimmel's studio was packed that night. The audience buzzed with excitement. Meghan Markle was scheduled to appear, and everyone expected the usual celebrity charm and carefully rehearsed stories. But what they got instead was something nobody saw coming. Jimmy walked out to thunderous applause, his trademark smile lighting up the stage. He waved to the crowd, adjusted his tie, and settled behind his desk. The energy in the room was electric. All right, Jimmy said, calming the audience. We have an incredible show tonight. Our guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway." The crowd cheered as Jimmy began his introduction. He mentioned her acting career, her charitable work, and of course, her famous marriage. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. Then Meghan walked out. She glided onto the stage in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people make in a year. The audience stood and applauded. She waved graciously, but something felt off. Her smile seemed forced. Her eyes scanned the room like she was inspecting it, rather than enjoying it. Jimmy stood to greet her, extending his hand for a warm handshake. She took it briefly, almost dismissively, before sitting down on the guest chair. The first crack in the evening had appeared. "Welcome, welcome," Jimmy said, returning to his seat. "Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled to have you." "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied. Her tone was polite, but cold, like she was doing everyone a favor just by showing up. Jimmy, ever the professional, pushed forward. "So, let's jump right in. You've been involved in so many amazing projects lately. Tell us what you've been working on." Meghan shifted in her seat. "Well, Jimmy, I've been focused on things that actually matter. Real issues. Not just entertainment fluff." The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room drop. Jimmy's smile flickered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. "Entertainment fluff," Jimmy repeated, laughing it off. "Well, some might say that's what pays the bills around here." "I suppose it does," Meghan said, looking around the studio with barely concealed judgment. "For some people, that's enough." Jimmy cleared his throat. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to. This felt personal. "Okay then," Jimmy continued, trying to steer things back on track. "Let's talk about your humanitarian work. I know that's something you're passionate about." "Passionate is an understatement," Meghan said, leaning forward. "While most people in this industry are worried about their next selfie or their next paycheck, I'm actually trying to change the world." That's great," Jimmy said, "though I think a lot of people in entertainment do care about important causes." Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do they really, Jimmy? Or do they just pretend to care when the cameras are on?" The audience gasped. This wasn't going well. Jimmy's face remained calm, but his eyes showed the hurt. He had built his career on being genuine, on using his platform for good. And here she was, attacking not just him, but everyone in his world. "I think that's a bit unfair," Jimmy said, his voice measured. "A lot of people use their platform to make a real difference." "A platform," Meghan scoffed. "Is that what we're calling it now? A platform for what, Jimmy? For making people laugh while the world burns?" Jimmy took a deep breath. The producers in the control room were probably panicking. The audience sat in stunned silence. Nobody knew what to say. "Comedy has value," Jimmy said firmly. "It brings people together. It helps people cope with difficult times. That matters." "Does it, though?" Meghan challenged. "Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? I mean, look at what I've accomplished. Look at the lives I've touched. What have you done besides tell jokes?" That was it. That was the line. Jimmy's expression hardened. He had been patient. He had been professional. He had tried to give her every opportunity to course correct. but she had gone too far. "What have I done?" Jimmy asked, his voice steady but firm. "I've raised millions of dollars for children's hospitals. I've brought attention to healthcare issues. I've given a voice to people who needed one. And yes, I've made people laugh, because sometimes that's exactly what people need." Meghan waved her hand dismissively. "Charity work that benefits your image. How noble." "My image?" Jimmy's patience was wearing thin. "You want to talk about image? You're sitting in a dress that costs more than most families make in 6 months, lecturing me about what matters?" The audience oohed. This was getting heated. Meghan's face flushed with anger. "How dare you?" she snapped. "You have no idea what I've been through. The sacrifices I've made." "Sacrifices," Jimmy repeated. "Right. The sacrifices of living in mansions and attending galas. Very relatable." "You wouldn't understand," Meghan said, her voice rising. "You couldn't possibly understand the pressure of my position, the expectations, the constant scrutiny." Jimmy leaned back in his chair. "You're right. I'm just a talk show host. What would I know about public scrutiny or pressure?" The sarcasm was thick. The audience was completely riveted. Nobody had ever seen anything like this on Jimmy's show. Meghan stood up abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted." "Insulted?" Jimmy asked, remaining seated. "I'm just responding to what you've been saying for the past 5 minutes. You came on my show and insulted me, my career, and everyone in this industry. I came on your show to talk about important issues," Meghan shot back. "But clearly, you're too small-minded to have that conversation." Jimmy stood now too. His face was calm, but his voice carried weight. Small-minded. That's rich coming from someone who can't see past their own self-importance. The audience was silent. The tension was unbearable. Meghan's hands were shaking with rage. "I've had enough of this," she declared. "I'm leaving." "That's probably for the best," Jimmy said quietly. But Meghan wasn't done. She turned back to face him, her eyes blazing. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy? You're threatened by people who actually make a difference. You hide behind your jokes because you know deep down that what you do doesn't matter." Jimmy's jaw clenched. He had tried to keep things civil. He had tried to take the high road, but this was too much. "What I do doesn't matter." Jimmy's voice was controlled, but powerful. "I've spent 20 years building this show. 20 years connecting with people, making them smile, giving them a break from their problems. I've interviewed presidents and activists and teachers and regular people with extraordinary stories. I've used this platform to highlight issues that matter, to raise money for causes that save lives. And I've done it without looking down on anyone or acting like I'm better than them." Meghan's face was red. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" "No," Jimmy said. "I don't think I'm perfect, but I also don't come on to someone else's show and disrespect them in front of their audience. I don't belittle people's work just because it's different from mine, and I don't act like the world revolves around me." "How dare you speak to me this way?" Meghan said, her voice shrill now. "Do you know who I am?" Jimmy nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know exactly who you are, and that's the problem." The audience gasped again. This was unprecedented. Jimmy Kimmel, known for his kindness and humor, was standing his ground against a guest who had completely crossed the line. Meghan pointed a finger at Jimmy. "You're going to regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Is that a threat?" Jimmy asked calmly. "It's a promise," Meghan hissed. "I have connections. I have influence. I can make things very difficult for you." Jimmy smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Go ahead. Do your worst. But here's the thing about respect. You can't demand it. You have to earn it. And you definitely can't buy it with designer dresses and fancy titles." Meghan's mouth opened and closed. She was speechless. For all her bravado, she hadn't expected Jimmy to fight back. She hadn't expected him to call her out. "You're making a huge mistake," she finally managed to say. "The only mistake I made was thinking this would be a pleasant conversation," Jimmy replied. "But you came here with an agenda. You came here to put me down, to make yourself look better by making me look worse. And I'm not going to let that happen." Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. "I'm done here." "You said that already," Jimmy pointed out. She glared at him with pure hatred. "You're pathetic." "And you're leaving," Jimmy said. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." Meghan turned on her heel and stormed toward the exit, but she stopped halfway, spinning back around. "Your show is garbage," she shouted. "Your comedy is stale, and you are nothing but he has been desperately clinging to relevance." The audience booed. They had been patient. They had watched this train wreck unfold. But now they were firmly on Jimmy's side. Jimmy remained calm. "If I'm a has-been, what does that make you? Someone who needs a has-beens show to stay in the public eye?" That did it. Meghan let out a sound of pure frustration and marched toward the exit. The cameras followed her every step. Her face was twisted with anger. Her designer heels clicked furiously against the floor. "Security," Jimmy called out. "Can someone please escort our guest out?" 2 security guards appeared, though they weren't needed. Meghan was already at the door. She turned one last time. "You haven't heard the last of this," she snarled. "I'm sure I haven't," Jimmy said. "But right now, I've heard enough." And with that, Meghan Markle stormed out of the studio, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the shocked silence of the room. Jimmy stood there for a moment, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. Then he turned to his audience. "Well," he said, his trademark humor returning. "That went well." The audience erupted. They laughed. They cheered. They applauded. They had just witnessed something incredible. They had seen their beloved host stand up to someone who thought they were above everyone else. Jimmy walked back to his desk and sat down. He straightened his papers, took a sip of water, and looked directly into the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," he said. "And when we come back, we'll have some actual entertainment. You know, the fluff that apparently doesn't matter." The audience laughed again. Jimmy smiled, but you could see the emotion in his eyes. This had affected him. How could it not? He had just been attacked on his own show, in front of his own audience, by someone who was supposed to be a guest. But he had handled it with grace. He had defended himself without losing his cool. He had stood up for his work, his career, and his values. He had shown that kindness doesn't mean being a doormat, that being nice doesn't mean accepting disrespect. As the show cut to commercial, the audience was still buzzing. People were turning to each other, talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. The crew members were shaking their heads in disbelief. The producers were probably already fielding phone calls. But in that moment, in that studio, everyone knew they had just seen something special. Not special in a good way, necessarily, but special in its raw, unfiltered reality. They had seen the mask slip. They had seen what happens when entitlement meets integrity. Jimmy had spent years building his reputation, years earning the trust and love of his audience, years proving that he was more than just a comedian, that he was a genuinely good person who used his platform responsibly. And in one night, one disastrous interview, Meghan had shown everyone exactly who she was. Not the polished, rehearsed version she presented to the world, but the real person underneath. The person who looked down on others. The person who thought her status made her better. The person who couldn't handle being challenged. The commercial break ended. Jimmy was back on camera, his smile firmly in place. "Welcome back," he said. "I'm not going to dwell on what just happened. Instead, I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to entertain you. Because apparently, that's all I'm good for." The audience laughed and applauded. They loved him even more now. He had been tested, and he had passed. But before we move on, Jimmy continued, I want to say something. I respect people who use their platform for good. I really do. I admire people who fight for important causes. But using your platform for good doesn't mean tearing others down. It doesn't mean acting superior. And it definitely doesn't mean disrespecting people who have opened their home to you. The applause was deafening. Jimmy had articulated what everyone was feeling. This show has always been about connection, he went on. About finding the humor in life, yes, but also about celebrating people. About giving them a place to share their stories. About creating moments of joy in a world that can be really hard sometimes. And if that's entertainment fluff, then I'm proud to be fluffy. More applause, more cheers. Jimmy had taken a negative situation and turned it into a teaching moment. He had shown his audience what real class looked like. Now, he said, clapping his hands together, let's talk about something fun. And just like that, the show continued. Jimmy interviewed his next guest with warmth and enthusiasm. He performed his comedy bits with perfect timing. He engaged with the audience with genuine affection. It was as if the confrontation had never happened, except everyone knew it had. Everyone had seen Jimmy at his best, defending himself while maintaining his dignity. Everyone had seen him refuse to sink to someone else's level. Back in the studio, the energy had completely shifted. What started as shock had transformed into admiration. The audience had come to see a talk show. Instead, they got to witness a masterclass in grace under pressure. Jimmy wrapped up the show with his usual charm. He thanked his guests, thanked his audience, and signed off with a smile. But as the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, everyone knew this episode would be remembered. Not because of who the guest was, not because of her status or her title or her designer dress, but because of what she revealed about herself. And what Jimmy revealed about himself. In the world of talk shows, hosts are supposed to make their guests look good. They're supposed to lob softball questions and laugh at mediocre jokes. They're supposed to be accommodating and deferential, especially to famous guests. But Jimmy had broken that unspoken rule. Not because he wanted to, not because he was trying to create drama, but because sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than keeping the peace. He had shown his audience that respect is a two-way street. That being kind doesn't mean being weak. That you can be professional while still having boundaries. And he had done it all while maintaining the integrity that had made him successful in the first place. He didn't resort to name-calling. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply stated facts and defended his work. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. On one side, a person who thought their status entitled them to treat others poorly. On the other, a person who had earned their success through hard work and genuine connection with people. The audience left that studio that night with a story to tell. They had witnessed something unprecedented. They had seen entitled arrogance collide with earned respect. And they had seen which one prevailed. Jimmy Kimmel had hosted thousands of guests over the years. He had interviewed celebrities and politicians and authors and athletes. He had navigated difficult conversations and awkward moments. But this was different. This was a guest who came onto his show not to promote something or share a story, but to tear him down. To use his platform to elevate herself by diminishing him. And he had refused to let that happen. In doing so, he had reminded everyone watching why they loved his show in the first place. Not because of the celebrity guests or the viral moments, but because of him, because of his authenticity, his humor, and his fundamental decency. The confrontation that was supposed to make him look small had instead made him look bigger. The attack that was meant to diminish him had only strengthened his connection with his audience. As people filed out of the studio that night, they weren't talking about Meghan's dress, or her title, or her supposed importance. They were talking about Jimmy, about his patience, his wit, and his refusal to be disrespected in his own house. They were talking about how he had given her every chance to be civil, how he had tried to steer the conversation back to normalcy, how he had only pushed back when pushed first. And they were talking about that final moment, when she had stormed out, hurling insults, trying to get the last word, and how Jimmy had let her go, refusing to chase after her or escalate further, showing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let someone reveal themselves. The episode would become legendary, not for the reasons anyone expected, but for what it revealed about character, about the difference between earned respect and assumed superiority, about the value of staying true to yourself, even when challenged. Jimmy had entered that evening as a successful talk show host. He left it as something more, a symbol of standing up for yourself, of defending your work and your worth, of refusing to be diminished by someone who thought their status made them better. And Meghan, she had entered as royalty, or at least adjacent to it. She left as a cautionary tale, a reminder that titles don't make you important, that designer clothes don't make you classy, that real influence comes from how you treat people, not from who you married or what you wear. The dramatic exit that was supposed to be her power move had backfired spectacularly. Instead of looking strong, she looked petty. Instead of looking important, she looked insecure. Instead of putting Jimmy in his place, she had revealed her own. In the end, the confrontation wasn't about politics or royalty or even celebrity. It was about something much simpler. It was about respect, about earned versus assumed, about substance versus style, about character versus status. And on that night, in that studio, in front of that audience, everyone saw which one mattered more. They saw that you can have all the fame and all the titles in the world, but if you don't have basic decency and respect for others, you have nothing. Jimmy Kimmel proved that night that entertainment isn't just fluff, that making people laugh isn't a lesser calling, that bringing joy and connection to people's lives is valuable work. Work worth defending. Work worth fighting for. He proved that you don't need a title to command respect. You just need integrity. You don't need designer clothes to have class. You just need to treat people well. You don't need royal connections to be important. You just need to do work that matters to you and do it with authenticity. The show that night was supposed to be routine, just another celebrity interview, just another promotional appearance, just another night of television. Instead, it became a moment, a real, unscripted, unrehearsed moment of truth, where someone showed exactly who they were, and someone else showed exactly who they were in response. And when the dust settled, when the anger faded, when the shock wore off, one thing was crystal clear. Jimmy Kimmel had won. Not because he had the last word, not because he had insulted her better, but because he had maintained his dignity while she had lost hers. He had remained himself, professional, witty, firm when needed, but never cruel, never petty, never stooping to her level. That's what real strength looks like. Not throwing your weight around, not demanding respect, not using your status as a weapon, but standing firm in your values while remaining true to who you are. The audience that night didn't just watch a talk show. They watched a lesson in character. They watched someone be tested and pass with flying colors. They watched integrity win over entitlement. And that's a show worth remembering.